Let's get into week 3. Here we go. Week 3. First thing we do, remember each week, is that we kind of review what happened in week 2. I gave you week 2 tasks. Same things. We're going to talk about the challenges, the rewards you had for each one of those different activities. Adding names, making phone calls, writing your notes, listening to the DVD, a lot of the same things. But I also want you to kind of evaluate the open house. You know, I asked you to sit an open house at the end of the last week. I hope you took it seriously. How many people came? Did you get any leads from that open house? Did it actually generate any leads for you? More importantly, what did you learn at the open house? I'm a huge, huge proponent that every time we do an activity, we should consciously become aware of what we learned from the activity. Does that make sense to you? And most people in our business don't slow down for even 3 minutes enough to ask themselves, what did I learn from the activity? What am I never going to do again? You know, like have the seller there with me for 3 hours. That's how you turn 3 hours into an 8-hour open house. And so, we learn those things. Okay? So what did you learn? Make sure you get there early enough to, open the doors and windows to air out the house. I mean, pick up the stuff they didn't pick up. I mean, it's just amazing to me how people might leave the condition of their home for an open house. I learned the hard way how to set directional arrows for open houses. I put it at the house, then I went down the block, then I went down to the corner, and by the time I got back, there were people already walking through the house. I learned to set the arrows out furthest away, then go towards the house. So all these little things we have to become conscious of. And so the purpose of me even having a little, review in there is to get you constantly thinking, what did I learn? What did I learn from this experience? All right, let's talk about buyers. We're going to talk about buyers. And I'm going to say something right up front that, I've been around this thing a long time. There's a lot of expressions we use in the real estate business, and one of the expressions that's been around since the beginning of time, as long as we've been around, are things like, buyers are liars. I'm going to offer to you, I've never agreed with that. I've never accepted that. The reason that expression has come to be is because it's not uncommon for a buyer to buy a home different than what they described to us originally they were looking for. I don't think the buyers are liars. I think that phrase was invented by the sales industry to cover for our inability to ask the right questions. We're showing people homes that we have no business showing them. And I'm going to try to show you specifically how I eliminated that, prevented that totally from happening to me. But the most significant question I ever learned to ask buyers was the one right there in front of you, and that is, why do you really need to buy? I'm just kind of curious. All right, now let's use a real scenario. Somebody's referred to you. You call them up, you start talking to them. Maybe you don't know them. A difference, but I'm talking to them and they say, we're looking for this price range in this part of town, and here's the kind of things we want. And I'm getting all excited now because I got me a buyer. Man, I got me a buyer. All right. And then I'm going to suggest that you slow down, take a deep breath, and ask the question. And you got to come up with, maybe, if you're not comfortable with those words, come up with something similar. And the question is, I'm just kind of curious, before we just start driving around looking at houses, you know what I really like to know? Why do you really need to buy one anyway? Why do you really need to buy a house? Because I'm here to tell you, when I finally started asking that question about 4 years into my career, and I asked it for over a dozen years, what I discovered were over half the buyers said what? When I say, why do you really need to buy a house? They say what? Well, I don't really need to buy one. Oh, good. Good. Hey, here's an idea. Why did I introduce you to the sellers who don't need to sell? How about that? Wouldn't you like to say that once, just one time to somebody? Well, what I learned was that it's not healthy when we as a real estate agent are more motivated for them to buy a house than they are. I'll let that just sink in for a minute. I need a commission. You've got to buy a house this weekend. And that comes across. I rate in the top 5 of my worst experiences in my real estate career what happened to me in my first year with a buyer. It happened to me one time, and I made a promise to myself I would never, ever let that happen to me again. At the end of my first year in a business, I realized all of a sudden, it's like I just woke up one morning or in the middle of the night and realized something about a buyer I'd been working with. You know what I realized? I realized I'd invested so much time with these buyers, I could now not stop working with them. It's one of the worst feelings I've ever experienced in my career. I can't stop now. You put too much time into them. You had no choice. And maybe you finally sell them something. And you close it and you get a check. Don't compute how much you made an hour. Don't go there. And I swore I'd never do that again. And for the next 16 years, I never did it again. And I will tell you the reason I was able not to do it again is because I learned to categorize my buyers. I categorize my buyers. They're either a 1, 2, or 3. And I know that's pretty basic, but I also know that 80% of the people in this business don't do it. A number 1 buyer is who we're all looking for, and there's only one criteria. They have a date to move. That's it. Don't make it fancier than it needs to be. They tell you, well, we got to be here in 10 weeks. Yes. And that's the buyer. We miss dinner with our families. We cancel days off. We miss the grandkids' soccer game. We pay the ultimate price for number 1 buyers. Is that all right if I say that? It's the truth. It's the nature of the beast. It's the way we're wired. I can't change that, so I'm not going to try. But here's what I'm going to try to change. You got a number 2 buyer. You know what the criteria for number 2 buyer is? They need to move. They have no date. They need to move, but they got no date. Who's that? You know who that is? I'll tell you who that is. They got their home for sale today. That's a good buyer. I'll work with them. I'll give them my time. I'll even show them some houses. Here's my message and what I've learned in over 30 years of watching real estate people, being one myself for over half that period of time. If you don't have criteria that separates a number 2 from a number 1 buyer, the risk you run is that you will give a number 2 buyer number 1 priority. Do you hear what I just said to you? Yes. And as an industry, we have got to stop doing that to ourselves and our family. They deserve, and we deserve better. Would you accept that?
Yes.
And then you got a number 3 buyer. My definition, everyone else. If you looked at my last year's business plan, you would see written in black and white in my last year's business plan, eliminate all number 3 buyers. I don't work with them. I simply do not work with them. I only work with 1s and 2s. And depending on your market conditions, at the time of the filming of this, we're in a pretty tough market in the United States. Canada, my friends in Canada, their market's moving in the same direction, following the United States. My friends in Australia and New Zealand who watch these videos, they're in a tough market. So there's a tough market worldwide right now. But here, listen to this. Your number 2 buyer needs to move, has no date. In the U.S., and most of the U.S., almost all of Canada, just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they were almost a number 1 buyer. Yes or no? As soon as I put the house on the market, it's going to be gone. We better get out there and see what's out there before we even put the sign in front of the house. So you got to go with whatever the market conditions at the time on how you treat your 1s and 2s. I'm working with a young guy in a state, certain state, and just a few weeks ago, I'm kind of coaching this young guy, and I was puzzled because when he filled out the initial coaching questionnaire, he said to me he's working 7 days a week. He has no balance whatsoever, and he's got 0 sales. And I said, that doesn't equate. And I got on the phone with him, and I said, I understand how you're working 7 days a week and you got no sales. You got nothing going on. He goes, I don't know, I'm just busy. And I said, well, we need to start with the number one time, the number one time consumer are buyers. So let's start with buyers. How many buyers have you got? And he said, I got 11. And I said, no, you don't. He says, what do you mean? I'm like 800 miles away. We're on a telephone. He says, I got 11 buyers. I says, no, you don't. He says, how do you know I don't have 11 buyers? I said, I sold over 200 homes a year for 6 years in a row. I've had a lot of buyers. I've never had 11 buyers at one time in my entire career. You can't have 11 buyers and no sales. Are you with me on this? It defies common sense. He said, I thought I had 11 buyers. I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to call you tomorrow, and you're going to categorize your buyers, 1, 2s, and 3s. And you're going to tell me how many you got in each category. Called him next morning. I said, okay, let's get into it. How many number ones have you got? He says, I see where you're going with this. He says, you're right. I got 3. I only got 3 number 1 buyers. I said, no, you don't. You can't have 3 number 1 buyers and no sales. Let's go through them. Tell me, why are they number 1s? He said, well, the first one, they're a young couple. They got like 80 to 100,000 cash. Really? Yeah, as soon as they sell their house, he said. We finished the process. Here's what he discovered. He had 1 number 1. He had 3 number 2s. And he had 7 number 3s. To his credit, this young guy took my advice. And the first thing he did is that he jettisoned the 7 number 3s. And it took a tremendous amount of courage for him to do that. Yes or no? Yes. You know why we don't want to get rid of some of the buyers we're working with? Because if we get rid of them, we got nothing else. It's the best we got to choose from. And if we don't have those, I got to go out and replace them. And we're fooling ourselves thinking that we got buyers. Let me just cut to the chase. This young guy came back and told me 10 days later, he said, he called me, he was so excited, he called me on Monday morning. He said, I want you to know I got my first sale. And I said, good for you. And he said, it was the 1 number 1 buyer that I ended up with. And here's what he said to me. He said, I like to think I would have sold them a house anyway, but I think because of what I went through with you, what it forced me to recognize is who that 1 number 1, so like the laser beam focused on those people, and what I eliminated, prevented from happening, is that possibly because I was trying to keep so many people happy, I kept that 1 number 1 from slipping between in the cracks. You hear what he just said? Yes. And all of us can relate to that. All of us. I'm going to give you an idea that very few few real estate people do. I believe very strongly that we should use a buyer's package. A buyer's package, in this industry, we're known for having lots and lots and lots of stuff for sellers in our listing material. We have pre-listing packages. We've got all these things that we're all excited about, and we do all these things for sellers. And then when it comes to buyers, typically what we do, here's my card, and we're going to get in the car and drive around. We're stumped on why it is that we don't have a lot of loyalty from a buyer back to us. I'm going to suggest it begins with what little we give to them that commands some loyalty. I believe that we should treat sellers and buyers the same. You need to give a buyer a buyer's package, just like you give a seller the seller's package. And so in the workbooks, I've put what I think goes into a buyer's package. We've got a title page, makes them feel special, prepared for Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. Here's the buyer's package here today. We've got things in there you want to have your bio about. If you got about yourself, you've got assistance. If they're new to the area, you want to have just a little map of your area in the buyer's package. Maybe showing some of the landmarks around town. Here's the area where you said you want to look at homes, that kind of deal. Get them oriented more quickly. You want to have information from maybe the parks and